So hi everybody, my name is Galen, and let's see, how does that look? Great. My name is Galen, I'm with Sierra Club BC, and I'm going to start with a little presentation, a little background about what this is all about, why we're here, why we're being asked to apply to participate in the process with the, for the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And then I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process, how it works to fill out the application. I'm not asking you or encouraging you to fill it out as we go, but instead it would be better to just take notes or listen and then fill it out after this is all done. And again, like Jeanette said, it'll be online pretty soon as a YouTube video. So, starting out with a little background, we've got two pipelines here on this map of BC and Alberta, and I think probably all of you will recognize what these are. The top one, the red one, is the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline to Kitimat proposed. The purple one to the south is the proposed new Kinder Morgan pipeline that we're here to talk about today, heading to Burnaby. And just a little, a little background. The process for the Kinder Morgan pipeline is a little bit different, and I'm going to talk a little more about that. But go to the next slide. There have been some changes made to several environmental acts, and so if you participated in the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline review process, you're gonna see that things are a little different. I want to start by asking how many people participated in that process, in the Enbridge Northern Gateway JRP, Joint Review Panel process. So maybe we can try clicking the Raise Your Hand button if you participated in that process. And I wonder, Jeanette or Eugene, are you able to give me any feedback? Or we got some raised hands?
Yep, I see 2, 3.
2 or 3. Okay. So, so two or three of you, maybe, or maybe a couple more, participated in the Northern Gateway review process, and one major difference between that process and the process we're talking about today for Kinder Morgan is that there won't be an oral hearing part of the review, or rather, there won't be an oral hearing that everyone is invited to participate in, and we'll get to more of how that works in a minute. But to talk a little more about the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline proposal and the process around that, it was really seen as, by myself and a lot of other people, as a turning point in the fight to stop these pipelines. Here is a big protest up in Prince Rupert outside the JRP, the Joint Review Panel hearings. And when these hearings happened, there were big rallies, there were lots of people who participated, and it was on the news all the time. People were really made aware of what was going on in BC with these pipelines. And to go back a slide, this is showing how many people were involved and participated in the process and how many people spoke against the pipeline. Over 4,000 people signed up for the Joint Review Panel hearing for the Northern Gateway pipeline, and over 1,000 spoke against the pipeline. So talking about these changes, here is a protest. This is talking about one of the omnibus bills that has been passed in the last couple of years, Bill C-45. But there's another omnibus bill before this one that was C-38 that made a lot of changes. Many of you may be aware of this, probably are. It made changes to the Environmental Assessment Act, to the National Energy Board, the NEB Act, the Navigable Waters Act, the Fisheries Act. And so how the changes apply to the process that we're talking about now, as I mentioned before, there won't be any oral hearings that everyone is invited to. like there was in Enbridge, and it's really too bad. I mean, it's from my perspective, this process is not as complete and it's not as easy for people to be involved in, but we're still strongly encouraging people to sign up and go through this application, and that's why we're doing this webinar.
Galen,
So,
I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Eugene here. I just want to clarify one point. It's not clear yet whether there will be an oral hearing. There still very well may be, and it's likely that there will be an oral hearing. The difference between this proceeding and the Enbridge Joint Review Panel hearing was that the ways that you can participate are more limited. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but essentially there used to be, or in the JRP, there were 3 ways you could participate: write a letter of comment, make an oral statement, which is where the bulk of people were able to participate, and being an intervener, which is a more involved status. So in this process, there are only going to be 2 levels of participation: letter of comment or intervener. They've taken away the option for that oral comment, which is what a lot of people may have been aware of in watching all the news coverage from the Enbridge process. So clearly this is a big change, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later on. But I just wanted to clarify that there may still be, and will likely still be, I think, an oral hearing. It's just a matter of who has the right to speak at those oral hearings that has changed.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Eugene. And Eugene's going to jump in here in just another minute and talk more about the next couple of slides. So this next slide is, how am I directly affected? The question of whether or not you are directly affected is a big part of this process for the Kinder Morgan review. In the slide here, we've got on the left the Burnaby spill. This happened in 2007. This is the Kinder Morgan spill that a lot of you probably remember. And on the right, this is a photo from the Tacloban, the typhoon in the Philippines. And so when you're going to be asked, when you do this application process, how are you directly affected? The National Energy Board has made it clear that they don't consider impacts of climate change to be to count as directly affected. So on the right here, I would consider that these people who were affected by this typhoon were directly affected by fossil fuel extraction, in that we know that storms are bigger and more intense, and this one for sure. The National Energy Board is not going to take that stance. Let's go on to the next slide. We're going to get more into what do they mean by directly affected. Eugene,
great, thanks.
Feel free.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Eugene Kung. I'm a staff lawyer with West Coast Environmental Law, and I'm co-presenting today with Galen. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is some of the changes to the participation in this process, and some of the changes that came, as Galen said, from some of the omnibus bills, including Bill C-38, which really changed the landscape and has kind of created this brave new world of NEB and environmental assessment. And so how it affects you as a potential intervener or as a potential participant is mostly summarized in changes to what I've put up here is Section 55.2 of the National Energy Board Act. And really what it does is it changes the board's participation requirements to consider those who are directly affected by the project. And if you'll see there, the wording of the section says the board shall consider or must consider representations of anyone who, in their opinion, is directly affected. The second part says it may consider representations of people who, in their opinion, have relevant information or expertise. And so what that means is that the intervention application or your application to participate, which is what we're talking about here today, is really going to be put up to this test. Are you directly affected? If so, then they have to hear from you. Or do you have relevant information? And if so, then they have the option of whether to hear from you. So clearly, making the case that you're directly affected is going to be a stronger, increase the likelihood that your application will be accepted. Now, this language of directly affected, and if we can get the next slide here again, that'd be great, seems pretty strict. And I know I've been speaking with a lot of people who have said, you know, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to say that I'm directly affected. I live away from the pipeline route, for example, or I live in another province. And you know, what we've been telling people is basically that we don't know how exactly they're going to interpret this directly affected person test. There's some guidelines that the NEB has put out on their website, and I've summarized some of what they've said here, and I'll go through that in person. But I do want to say that in a number of other public proceedings, and I'm thinking particularly about coroner's inquests or the Cohen Commission on fish stocks that happened here in BC a couple of years ago, the test for participation there was arguably more strict than the language of directly affected. It was something to the effect of substantially impacted. And we know from experience from those hearings that it was interpreted very broadly, and almost everyone who applied was accepted. Now, we don't know whether this is going to be the case here. Part of this kind of new rules is that it will be very interesting to see the trends and how the National Energy Board interprets this directly affected person test. What it does give us a clue about is how to kind of frame the application, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more in a second. But I just wanted to make the point that even though we don't know what it's like, we do know that in other circumstances it has been interpreted fairly broadly, and it will remain to be seen how that gets interpreted here. And so some of the things that the NEB has said itself, sorry, just last slide again, was about what a directly affected person could be, you know, looking at as much detail as possible of why you think you're directly affected. So, you know, the examples they give are commercial property or other financial interests. So, do you own something that could be affected by either the construction or a spill resulting from the proposed project? So that would include the pipeline and the tankers. How do you use it? Is it your personal use? Is it your house? Is it maybe you go for a jog or a bike ride somewhere along the pipeline route, or you use a park that has potential to be affected, or you go fishing in a river that the pipeline crosses? These are all examples of ways that you could be considered to be directly affected. We would encourage people to really think about it through that lens of directly affected, and make as strong of a case as possible for your situation for that. A couple good resources would be looking at the pipeline route and the maps, which are posted online, and including not only the preferred route, but also we're just hearing recently that Kinder Morgan's now saying that they now prefer the alternate route through Burnaby, so that could affect whether you're directly affected or not. And so I would suggest, you know, saying any of the proposed routes, whether it's the preferred route or the alternates, should be considered when you're kind of setting out your geographic proximity to the pipeline and the pipeline route. Also, not to really think about how your personal use may be interpreted. So it doesn't need to just be I live right on the route, or I live you know, on the water that is at risk. If you use it for recreation, if you just commute around that area, some of the other examples I gave earlier, fishing or whatever, those are all things that may be considered by the NEB, but it's yet to be determined how they'll be considered. Another just useful way to think about being whether you're directly affected, in addition to the root itself, is some of the spill modeling that that Kinder Morgan itself has done, which can also be found in the application. So if you if you can make the case that some of your interests will be directly affected by some of the spill modeling, and if you look at them, they're quite horrifying in terms of the impact of a potential spill. That would be something that is worth bringing putting forward in your application. The second piece, sorry, and so I just want to, the second bullet point here, it talks about kind of how you might be directly affected, and so that would talk about the degree of the connection and the likely and severity of harm and so on. And so again, coming from this, what we take from this is that it's better to be more detailed and more specific about exactly how you use it, you know, not just say I fish in the rivers, but I fish in these specific rivers this many times a year, and so on, and be as specific as possible to talk about how you are directly affected. And moving to the next slide, the second factor that they're going to consider, and this is again, they may hear from you, they may decide to hear from you if they decide, they being the board, that you have relevant information or expertise. So it's not as strong as directly affected, but it's certainly something that's worth mentioning, especially if you want to bolster your application. So what type of knowledge do you have? What's the source of that knowledge? Are you a PhD in oil spills in coastal areas? That would probably be pretty relevant. Or are you someone who has used, you know, going back to the fishing example, has fished in the area for years and maybe has something that they can say about the way that that the water will be affected or the fish stocks might be affected by a spill or the project. These are all types of things that we would suggest including, but again, just keeping in mind that even if the board decides that you have relevant information and expertise, they're not required to hear from you. The wording of the statute says that they may consider your representation if, in their opinion, you have relevant information or expertise. So those are the two factors that that they'll be considering, and we are happy to talk about this further. We'll be coming back to it a little bit when going through the actual application, and then I'm happy to answer questions about that in the question and answer period. Thanks.
Great, cool. Thanks a lot, Eugene. Let's see if we can move to the next slide here. Okay, so we're going to start to go through the step-by-step process of filling out this application now. So I'm actually going to start by showing you on my computer what the website looks like from the very beginning. So you can start by going to neb-one.gc.ca there, and you'll get this page. You want to scroll down, and on the right-hand side, you'll find the Trans Mountain expansion. You can click on that. Then you're going to get this page, and I'll go back to my slideshow in a minute, but I'll just show you that on this page, if you scroll down and scroll down and scroll down, oh, there it is. There's a button, Apply to Participate. That's the button you want. So that's where we'll be starting. Now I'm going to go back to my slides because I've got all that in there. So there's another way to get there. This is showing you to scroll down, Apply to Participate, just like I showed you, and we get started. So the first step here is to create or log into my NEB account. So if you, there are two ways to do this. One is to pick a sign-in partner. Now these are banks, basically major banks in Canada, or you can make your own GC key. I made it a GC, or Government of Canada key, and that's how most people have chosen to do it. It's pretty easy. It's not. It's just about the same as making a new email account. It doesn't require a ton of information. So if you choose that one, then if you have a GC key from some point in the past, maybe you've filed online documents to the government, you can use that. Most people haven't done that, but maybe you do. Most people are going to have to register for a new GC key. So you click there. Terms and conditions of use, you'll want to read over this. You understand that you're responsible for your ID, your password, etc. So read over that, and if you accept it, say I accept. The next step is to put in, this is the information you have to put in to create your GC key registration login. You have to put in 3 security questions. You have to fill those all out and create a password, and that's basically it. You'll get this screen. All you have to, it says you succeeded. Just press continue. And then you can start. Are you a first-time user, or do you have an NEB account? Again, probably most of you are first-time users. Now, option 2, going back to whether you want to make a GC key or whether you wanted to do the partner login. Here's what the partner login looks like. These are your options for partners. So if you already have an online account with one of these financial institutions, then you can use that online account to log into this process. Some people prefer to do this. It's probably pretty easy, but either way is fine. Personally, I don't have an account with any of these banks, so I didn't have that option. But if you do have an account, then you can log into it. The NEB states that they will not be sharing any of the information you put into this with your bank. And then you get this screen. So now we've gone in, we've put in our new login and password, or existing one if you had it, and we can get started. You get started by clicking apply to participate there. And here we go. I'm applying as, and now you can choose, are you applying as an individual, or do you have an authorized representative to represent you, or perhaps you are that representative. Now that would be for someone who, for some reason, isn't able to do this process on their own. Or you can apply as a group. You can apply as an organization, as it says below, maybe a company or an NGO. I'm reading this first bullet down below, an Aboriginal group, a government agency, or 2 or more people who basically have the same interests and want to say the same thing. So it's really up to you whether you want to apply as an individual or as part of a group. So assuming you choose individual, you click that one and click next. That's step 1. On to step 2. Step 2 is basically just giving you the basic information. This is what we're doing. The project name is the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. It gives you a very brief description of what that project is, an expansion, they call it, of Trans Mountain Pipeline System from Edmonton to Burnaby, 981 kilometers of new pipeline, 193 of existing pipeline, and expansion of the Westridge Marine Terminal. So then you can click next if you understand all that. A little more information they wish that you understand, including a link to the guidance document on section 55.2, which Eugene was showing a bit of and talking about. It's telling you need to go through the whole process if you choose to do this. So you can click next. A privacy agreement. So you want to read and understand this. Now, privacy and personal information, one thing I can say about that, I'll show you the rest of this application, but they are posting and have posted already. If you've already applied, they've posted your application online, and I'll show you what that looks like as it appears online. People will have, any member of the public will have access to see most of your application. And I'll show you what that looks like. So you would click that you agree and then click next. So here's what that looks like. This is a screenshot from the applications that have already been filed, applications to participate. My name's Galen Armstrong, so I don't show up on this list. I would have been on the next page, I suppose. But I'll show you, if you were to find my name, you could click on it, and then this is what you would get. This is part of it anyway. It's not the whole thing. So this is my application. It shows my name, it shows my phone number, my email address, and my address. Feel free to send me a postcard if you like. And so some people have expressed that they're uncomfortable with this information being public. I've heard some suggestions that, well, you could create a new email address, or if you apply as a group, you could you'd be submitting all the information together as a group, so not every individual would have to provide this information. I guess that's all I can say about that. I would encourage you to apply. So then putting in that information, step 5, your contact information. This is you, the person applying, your name, your address, etc. So you got to put all that in to step 6. If you need to add an authorized representative, for example, if you have a lawyer who's going to be representing you, I would guess that most of you won't, but perhaps you do, then this is the place where you would add that. So now we're on step 7, and this is where it gets a little more interesting. Eugene talked earlier a little bit about commenter versus intervener. So these are, and he mentioned that in the Northern Gateway pipeline process, there were 3 options. It was commenter, intervener, or to speak in an oral hearing. In this case, now there's only 2 because of the new laws that have been passed. So you can choose if you want to participate as a commenter or an intervener. And again, the commenter basically, if accepted, will be able to write a letter. The intervener, if accepted, will have to go through a more time-consuming process. So I'm going to just kind of go over these bullets that they provide here. An intervener may provide evidence. An intervener will respond to information requests or oral cross-examination on evidence you file. So Kinder Morgan, for example, can ask questions on any evidence that you give. An intervener may ask information requests or cross-examine other parties who file evidence and can provide a final argument. So it says intervening requires a time commitment to the hearing process. They ask that you be there for most of the hearing process, although we don't know exactly what that'll look like. They ask that you're reading the documents that come through that are submitted, and those will be submitted online. It is definitely a more time-consuming process. I personally click to participate as a commenter. It is your choice, but just think about which would be best for you.
Galen, can I just...
you want to add on that? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to make a couple quick points here. One is just to clarify that the change to this kind of 2-tiered level of participation away from the 3-tiered level, as I understand it, is not resulting from the changes from Bill C-38. It's the NEB's own process. So they, as an administrative tribunal, have the ability to control their own process, and they've decided in this process that these are the 2 levels of participation. Just wanted to clarify that. And then secondly, as you're correct in saying that you know, within these 2 options, there's quite a difference in what you have the ability to do. So a commenter has to put their views in written form and will happen before the hearing. so before the evidence has been tested, for example. Whereas an intervener will be involved in the hearing and has the right to provide evidence if they choose to, and as Galen said, if they do provide evidence, they have to respond to questions about it, which can be quite time-consuming. I want to say that there isn't a requirement if you're an intervener to provide evidence or a requirement to ask information requests or cross-examine other parties' evidence, but it's the only opportunity you'll have to be an actual, to be a participant in the process and to review all of this stuff. Again, you're not required to do all those, to participate at that level. I think it's really going to vary from party to party, from intervener to intervener. And what I've heard some other folks say is that you can really make of that intervener status what you want, and you can participate as much or little as you want. I will say that given the volume of information, the application itself is 15,000 pages. Your email inbox will probably never look the same if you apply to be an intervener. That said, you're not required to read everything, of course, and there will be some level of support out there. But certainly if you want to be able to ask questions of Kinder Morgan and their evidence and their experts and make a final argument, and which may be an oral argument if that gets if that's what the process is decided to be, then your intervener is really your only option. Another quick piece on this is that, again, what is still unknown at this point in terms of the hearing is not only just whether it's going to be an oral hearing or not, but where it's going to be. It's possible that it will be in Calgary, it's possible that it will be in Vancouver, it's possibly be in Edmonton, or even somewhere along the route. We don't know, again, at this point for certain where it will be. My best guess is either Vancouver or Calgary, and so again, the more interveners that are based in the Lower Mainland, the stronger the case can be for the process to be held in Vancouver. But it's not even clear that they'll be asking interveners where they think the hearing should be held.
Great. Thanks a lot for that clarification, Eugene. So we'll have an opportunity at the end again to ask questions if there are any other questions on that. Moving on to the next slide. So step 8, and again, this is something that Eugene was talking about earlier in the presentation, and this is the question of, are you directly affected, and or do you have relevant information or expertise? And so Eugene was basically saying that if you're able to demonstrate or to say that you are directly affected by the proposed project, then the National Energy Board will hear you. If you are able to demonstrate that you have relevant information or expertise, the National Energy Board may choose to hear what you have to say. Is that right, Eugene?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I was just muted there.
Perfect. So in this step, so step 8, this is important. You can click one or both of the following. So are you directly affected, and or do you have relevant information or expertise? If you feel that those are both true, definitely click both. And of course, if you feel like just one or the other is true, choose the one that's right for you. And step 9, this is probably the most important step of all. This is your connection to the project issues. This starts with this list of issues. There are 12 issues that you can choose from. You can choose as many as you want. This is a list of ways that you might be directly affected, and or that your information or expertise that you believe is of value to the board, and they want you to provide an explanation in the box below. Right at the bottom, you can just see the top of that box. Limit your answer to no more than 500 words. And that's where you'll have your chance to say, this is why, this is how I'm directly affected, and or this is why I have information and expertise that should be heard. So click as many as you want, as many as you feel are true here. You'll have to take some time to go down and read the whole list and click the ones that you feel to be true. And I would encourage you, if you think these are true, click as many as you can. This is kind of your one chance to say, I should be able to speak on these issues. So it's important that you take your time and pick the ones that really work for you. So, for example, looking down the list, the appropriateness of the general route and land requirements for the proposed project. So, especially if you have land on the route, that's going to be important. But also, if you use land on the route, let's see, contingency plans for spills. This is number 11. Contingency plans for spills, accidents, or malfunctions during construction and operation of the project. And remember that, part of this is increased tanker traffic. And so if you live on the coast, you can definitely make an argument that you'd definitely be directly affected by a spill, I would say. So take your time on that piece. Step 10, you've gotten through the most important part. Step 10 is access, notification, and service, so English or French. And then this is, are you able to access the board's electronic document repository? So basically, if you have access to the internet, then you're able to access those documents, and you can click yes. Review and submit. Then, so this is the final step. You got to, you can review and look over everything you've done and make sure it's what you want to say, and then you can submit, or you can just submit right away. It's probably a good chance to say that the application that I just showed you that we went through is obviously the online application. If you or someone that you know is unable to do the online application, but you want to do a paper application, that is an option. You need to contact the National Energy Board and ask them to send you a paper application. Now we've just got about a week left before the deadline, and so I would really encourage, if you or someone you know needs a paper application, make sure that you let them know as soon as possible, and they'll send it to you, and then you'll need to send it back to them. Each person who wants a paper application has to get one directly sent to them. They're personalized, specialized. And if you decide for some reason that you don't want to fill it out and send it back, evidently the National Energy Board will want that copy back from you. So this is the end of the formal presentation. In just a second, we'll open it up for a question and answer. But here is my email address, galen@sierraclub.bc.ca, and also Eugene Kung. You can see his address there, Eugene_KUNG@WCEL.org. Please feel free to contact either of us with further questions. But right now, we should be able to answer the questions that you have.
Yeah, thanks, Galen. So we have just about 20 minutes open for question and answer. So if you would like to ask a question, you can either type it into the questions pane, and I'll read it aloud. Or you can raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to ask a question verbally, and I'll unmute your line. So we have a couple of questions that came in while you were giving the presentation. So the first one is, I live in the San Juan Islands that will be directly affected by any fossil fuel spills that result from the increased shipping traffic that will carry the diluted bitumen from Burnaby to other ports. I live on shoreline property that would be polluted by any significant spill, but I live in the U.S. So it didn't have a question at the end of that, but I'm guessing she would like you to speak to how she would be perceived as directly affected.
Yeah, so I think you've really set out well and a good example of how to make a case that you're directly affected. There's no citizenship or residency requirements for applying to be a participant in the process, and so what I would suggest for Janet is to really clearly set out, as you have here and even be more specific about how you will be directly affected. So talking about your shoreline property, how much time you spend there, and so on, and then referencing anything from the application itself about how, and so the spill modeling that I had mentioned earlier would be a good place to start. Being as specific as possible will help you. And in this case, it may be an example of where it's more clearly obvious. Although, again, we don't know exactly how strictly they're going to interpret the directly affected test. So I would be very curious to see how the NEB is going to interpret it. One of the questions that we've been having from people who are curious about whether they are directly affected or whether they can make that test or whether they'll pass that test is one of the points of interest for those of us who have been tracking these changes to the process is to see exactly how it's going to be interpreted, how narrowly it's going to be interpreted, and to be able to get a sense of what the trends are. So even though it's quite a process to apply, we are encouraging people, if they feel strongly about this project, to apply, and at the very least, it will give us a sense of how what the trends are emerging from how they interpret the application. I wanted to take a moment to just mention something else that folks may not be aware of. In this process, for the first time as well, that I'm aware of anyway, the proponent, so Kinder Morgan, will also, we understand, have an opportunity to review all of the applications for participation and comment on them. Now there's obviously some fairness questions involved in that we're all very alive to, and it's concerning, of course, how much if the NEB takes Kinder Morgan's submissions and rejects applications for people who may otherwise be clearly directly affected. I'm of two minds of this. One is that it's a little bit frustrating to have this kind of fairness issue, but at the same time, there's another way to think about it, which is that even in filing your application to participate, whether you get accepted or not, someone at Kinder Morgan will be reviewing that, and so it is an opportunity, at least, to have your views heard in the form of this in the form of this application and read by someone at Kinder Morgan, whether that's Richard Kinder or an employee with less decision-making power remains to be seen, but that's at least something to consider as well.
Great, thanks, Eugene. So we have another question. Can you submit attachments as part of your comments, such as a scientific paper on how bitumen precipitates sinks in the presence of small biological particles?
So I can take a crack at this, unless you have a you have a good answer for this, Galen?
No, you go for it.
Okay, so I was just looking at the NEB website itself, and they have set out a little bit about what a letter of comment looks like. As we mentioned, in terms of the two modes of participation, the letter of comment is going to be a less involved one, and it will also be given less weight by the board, and they've said so themselves on the basis that the letters of comment are not seen as sworn evidence. So as people may know from watching Law and Order, when someone is giving evidence, it's in a hearing, it's usually done under oath, and that goes to the weight that the panel will give. The letters are not going to be considered sworn evidence, and there's just logistical reasons for that. And so, what's really gonna, it's really going to come down to how much weight the NEB will give to these letters. I don't see here any so the letters for comment, I wonder if I can just put this out in the chat box just to give people a link to, there we go, 1 second. I'm just going to pasting a link in the chat box that people can click on if they want, which talks exactly about this question from the NEB's website. You know, they set out some of the requirements for the letter of comment, name, address, phone number, etc., the hearing number. You need to make sure you get that right, and then your comments. There's nothing in there that prohibits attaching a scientific paper that as you've asked. The downside, though, is that it's not going to be considered sworn evidence, and it won't be considered even given the same weight if that same paper was tabled as evidence by an intervener. And that's just, you know, the balance that people are going to have to consider when deciding what level of participation to engage in. Unfortunately, that's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in, and it's not ideal, I recognize, but I don't see anything prohibiting you from attaching a study, but I can say that from the NEB's own website, and here's the exact quote from what they say: letters of comment will not be considered sworn evidence and are not subject to questioning, so cross-examination, for example, or information requests. As a result, letters of comment may not be given the same weight as sworn evidence that has been tested through the questioning in a hearing. So that's just something to consider when making your choice.
Okay. We have another written question. Because the assessment is only for the pipeline and the expansion of the Westridge terminal, is it enough to talk about the effects of tanker traffic spills or spills as your evidence of being directly affected? Are the tankers being subcontracted out, and therefore Kinder Morgan is not legally responsible for them?
There's a couple questions in there. Galen, you want to tackle the first one?
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that marine shipping is included in what the NEB is looking at, and so to me that says that directly affected would include super tankers and spills. Is that how you read it, Eugene?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's actually even directly in the list of issues.
Right.
Issue number 5, the potential environmental and socioeconomic effects of marine shipping activities that would result from the proposed project, including the potential effects. Again, that could potentially be interpreted very narrowly or more broadly. The second part of the question, which is who's going to own the super tankers and who's legally responsible, I don't think is going to should not be interpreted to prohibit people from using the tanker traffic as their example of being directly affected, because I think it's clearly within the issues list, and that's what I would focus on. Just for interest, so people know, generally speaking, each super tanker is owned by its own corporation or its own company, which then therefore limits the liability of that tanker often to just the tanker itself, which if it is leaking is probably not worth as much. That's an approach that and a lot of shippers have taken, not just oil shippers. So whether Kinder Morgan is legally responsible or not, that obviously remains to be seen. But in terms of your question about being directly affected, yes, as Galen said, tankers and tanker spills are part of that.
Great. Okay, so I'll move on to the next written question we have. It's, I have produced many provincial park plans, interpretive material, GCC website info pages involving grasslands. I would like to make sure restoration of grasslands is taken seriously. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I would just say that that sounds like that's expertise that you have and information that the National Energy Board should definitely consider. So if you're directly affected, definitely state that, but also state that you have relevant info and expertise, and really make that case in the 500 words or less.
Okay. And one more question. Will the letters to the NEB be released publicly?
Yes, I believe they will.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's it. Yeah.
Do we know how they'll be releasing them? Will it be online or?
It'll likely be online. It'll form part of the record. So
Okay.
likely on the NEB's Trans Mountain expansion site, where all of the other evidence and is listed, the letters of comment will also be listed.
Okay. Well, that looks like that's all the questions that we've received so far. If anyone has, oh, there's one more. The Enbridge hearings were only publicly available if the 1,159 testifiers opposed to the pipeline videotaped themselves. If the NEB letters are in the public domain, they are far more usable to rally public opposition.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think I see a hand up here.
Oh, you do?
Francis Weiss.
Okay. Sure.
Unmute them?
Yeah, I'll unmute Francis.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Hi.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to, I guess I'm not sure whether I should actually just put in a letter or whether I should become an intervener. I do belong to Kamloops Naturalist Club, BC. I've been a president of BC Nature. I've been involved in these sort of issues for many, many, many years. But my expertise in grasslands is very specific to one section, well, the section that goes from Kamloops to Merritt. And in a couple of places it actually goes through provincial parks. And I really want to make sure that they make an over-the-board, above-board effort to really restore grasslands and really sort of encourage them to be cutting edge in terms of developing grassland restoration methods. Because there's one park where between a rock and a hard place, there's a community down below where the present or the old pipeline goes, but the community has come out in force saying we don't want it through our community, throw it up the hill into the provincial park, Lac du Bois Provincial Park. Grasslands are only 1% of the province, and they've already been altered by cattle grazing, by building houses, by whatever, and so which way do I go? Should I really take the time and the effort to become an intervener to really make my voice heard? Hello?
Galen or Eugene, do you want to take that?
Hi, sure. It's Eugene here. Thanks for your question, Francis. It sounds to me like you do have quite a lot of expertise that could be useful to the NEB. Of course, it's going to be their opinion that counts and not mine. You know, in your question of whether to be a commenter or an intervener, if you have a very specific issue that you want to deal with, you can limit your intervention participation to that issue. There's nothing barring you from that. So, you know, I can't tell you which one to do, but I can, you know, we've kind of set out the levels of participation that are involved, and you know, certainly you will have more opportunity to ask both Kinder Morgan and any of the other interveners and present before the NEB if you have specific evidence. The best way to do that would be as an intervener.
Yeah.
does that help?
Yes, it does. And so but also I guess the other question attached to that is, should I go as a representative of the club, the local naturalist club, or even, I know BC Nature is involved with Canadian Nature Federation, so they wouldn't be able to be a double, and they're doing marine, they're concerned with marine stuff. So
Right.
the grasslands just, as always, gets second shrift. So it's just what the best way to do it is as an individual or as a naturalist club. Maybe I'll talk to the club and see how we can go. And I would write all the material and be the representative. But,
Right.
It's which gets heard best.
Yeah, I think the key there is going to be which of those organizations, or even you as an individual, is most likely to be considered directly affected. It's going to be interesting to see how the NEB deals with applications from organizations, and especially environmental organizations, because of this directly affected test.
Yes, yeah.
As I said, I don't know how they're going to do that, but certainly we know that that's the test they're going to use.
Yeah. And I know that the Cattlemen's Association is making is doing something, but I don't know. I'll have to talk to them and find out. That might be another group, or Grasslands Conservation Council, who I've worked for. We could piggyback on them or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's another option. It sounds like you have quite a lot of expertise. Another potential option would be to be an expert witness for them. That's a kind of a whole nother level. But it would be, if there's a group that has, for example, has intervener status, and you are there as kind of a technical support kind of role, that's another option. I will say that if you file evidence, it would be subject to potential information requests and potential cross-examination by the other parties, including Kinder Morgan and other interveners. But that's part of the testing of that evidence that will allow for the NEB to give it more weight than, for example, the letter of comments that's not unsworn that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for this webinar.
Pleasure.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and mute Francis's line again, and we have a couple more text questions that came in. We're at 1 o'clock. Are the presenters okay with staying on for a little bit?
Yep, I can do about 10 more minutes max.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So let's see. The next text question we have is, I'm looking at a map of the pipeline on the Kinder Morgan website and see that there are existing pipelines and the new pipeline. It's hard to see exactly the property that the pipeline touches on this map. Would it be pointless to comment on being directly affected if it's already an existing pipeline versus it must be only in regards to the new pipeline?
Well, on the question of if it will only be in regards to the new pipeline, I would say yes. It will. I mean, they're specifically looking at that. Eugene, is there easy access to a more detailed map on their website?
The maps that I've seen have been either on the NEB's own site, or actually Kinder Morgan has put up a site that has the application as well on it. That is, just give me 1 second, application.transmountain.com. And I think on there's an interactive map that you can look at that may be a little more user-friendly than the one that's filed with the NEB. I don't know. I haven't really had a chance to really explore the whole route and what that map provides, but I think your response was is correct in that their focus is on the expansion, but given how closely it follows in many areas, I would say that if you're affected by the existing pipeline, you may be affected or likely to be affected by the expansion as well. And then there's also the question of how the existing pipeline is going to be used once the new one has been built. And if you're affected by that, then that may be another factor.
Okay. And next question is, you said that if you are an intervener, you must present at the entire hearing. This could be many days. How many days do you estimate?
Well, I want to just say that the National Energy Board states that you don't need to be there at the entire hearing. They say something like it would be good for you to be there for as much as you can, and they say you need to be there at the beginning to state your presence and your appearance, but you don't have to be there for the whole time. I don't have a good guess for how long the hearings will be. How about you, Eugene?
It's hard to say right now, but probably more than a week. That said, Galen is exactly right. You don't have an obligation to be there if you're an intervener for the entire hearing, and so it's really up to each intervener what they feel. I just want to mention we didn't really go through it in this webinar, but the National Energy Board also has a process for applying for funding to apply. That's dependent on you being accepted as an intervener, of course, and there's a number of different aspects to it that we don't have time to go through here. But if especially people who are clearly directly affected and may not have the means to if they're going to hire a lawyer or an expert or have to travel if it's in Calgary, the option is there, the possibility is there. I think that applies as well to groups, or applies especially to groups, I would say, who may qualify. But we can't really go into much of that now. If you think that applies to you, have a look at the website and give either Galen and I a shout, and we can help you navigate that.
Okay. We have another question that's sort of an add-on to the question that was submitted before about the pipeline route. It said, or is the new pipeline a twinning of the existing one, so it would be right next to the existing one?
It's in many places it's right next to it, but not through the whole route, as my understanding. And as I said earlier as well, there's the main preferred route, as they call it, and then there are alternatives that they've considered. If any of the main or alternative routes are near you or directly affect you, then that's something that I would put into your application.
Okay. All right. And let's see. Are cumulative impacts within the scope of issues, for example, the effect of a second pipeline next to the first or the expansion of Kinder Morgan, in addition to other oil and gas expansion projects?
Galen, you want to try that one?
I mean, I would just basically say no. I think that Kinder Morgan will be looking very specifically at this pipeline. And as we mentioned before, marine activities are included, but no, upstream and downstream and cumulative impacts won't be looked at in this review process.
Okay. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our questions now. Unless anyone has a last-minute one they want to submit, or raise your hand if you want to ask a question verbally. I'm not seeing any. So I think we will leave off there. I will be sending a video recording of this webinar to everybody, and if you have any questions, you can just reply to me, and I'll do my best to get an answer for you. So thanks for joining us and all your great questions, and good luck with your applications.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Great. Thank you.